Happy Wednesday, everybody. Happy to join you for your lunch break, coffee break, whatever it is you're doing here with me on Simply Felicity. Thank you so much for watching. I have another super guest today that I was able to spend some time with last week and have the most marvelous time. I'm excited to share that with you, but I've got a really proper introduction for her. So I'm going to read that now. Jane Lump is my guest today. She is a lifelong observer of people and is especially curious about the language they use to define themselves. After a real career as a change management consultant, she finally realized that you can't manage someone else's change. How true is that? Instead, you listen, witness, and inspire change. Using the skills she earned as a professional facilitator, she now works with tools like mind mapping and facilitated graphics to help individuals and small teams align and move in a common direction toward their vision of purpose. We're going to be talking a little bit about that today. I got to experience mind mapping. So cool. Run with Scissors shares real life stories. This is her book. We're also going to talk about of innovation, breakthrough thinking, and creative problem solving that demonstrate the value of taking risks and questioning conventional wisdom with a proven framework. It provides stories to inspire and exercises to let the reader practice open-ended and open-hearted thinking. So I welcome with me on Simply Felicity, Jane Lump. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, I'm happy to be here. This is great. Thank you.
It really is. So, if you don't mind, I have got to start out with mind mapping. Actually, sharing that post got a fair amount of interest. And I got a private message like straight away, and then some comments underneath, like, what's that? Never heard of that. And guys, it is not new. I just want to let you know, I don't want to make you feel late to the game. I hadn't heard of it, but it's not new, but man, it is one of those time tested things that can really give you a lot of breakthrough. So tell us how you got introduced to mind mapping and about, a little bit about what it is.
Okay. In my corporate career, I worked with groups of people, oftentimes trying to come up with solutions to a client's problem. And that might be the leadership at two banks that were merging, or it might be the leadership trying to figure out the messaging around a merger or an acquisition. And what I realized is that unless that step in the whole process, defining the problem, having everybody have the same language and seeing it clearly was solid, then no matter what kind of strategy we built on top to communicate things, to organize things, it really wouldn't stick because the leadership would not be walking the walk and talking the talk. So part of what I started doing was look at tools that could help align people in their thinking. And one of the tools that I found was mind mapping. And mind mapping comes out of the original person that I know of as the originator is Tony Buzan. And I studied under Michael Gelb, who was one of his disciples, I guess you would say. And it is basically a way of thinking that creates open-ended, broad kind of perspective. And it's also visual and colorful and able to be done with either an individual or with a group.
It is so
I know.
Yeah, and exactly. I want to just insert the name of your Facebook page just so that after this people can pop on and take a look at, a little bit of an example. So it's creative. What is it again?
Actually, the easiest, there's a Facebook page for my book, but the one that you'll see more examples of mind mapping, vision boards, and the work I do is From Dreams to Reality.
That's it. From dreams to reality. Yes. Awesome.
But
Yeah.
I have,
So go
I
ahead.
have mine here. I can hold up. I don't know
Please
how much
do.
people can see, but this is
Hold on.
actually
Keep
my
it up. I'm
manual.
sorry. I don't want to make your arms tired, but I'm not in solo. There you go. That's really good.
Okay.
It gives
This
them
is
an
my mind
idea.
map for this coming year, and
Nice.
it's a part of the planning process that I use every year, and actually in between the year when I start a significant project or goal. So what it does is it takes radiant thinking. It uses colors that stimulate the brain in different ways than words. It uses images in addition to words so that you kind of bounce back and forth between the left and the right brain. And it's the whole theory around it is that it keeps your mind open-minded enough that you can discover everything you need to discover before you start to make decisions. And that I like to say that we oftentimes, I think I told Felicity this analogy the other day, is that, we go off to do something and we walk through the woods a certain path and we kind of beat down the grass and go between the trees and we make our path. And then the next day we go that same path, and the next day we go that same path. And whether it's how you drive to the grocery store or pick your kids up from school, whatever you do in a continual, I always turn left. I ride around with one of my friends sometimes and I'm like, wait, you forgot to turn. And she goes, well, I always go this way. And I'm like, I always go that way. But we do get in patterns. And what happens when your mind gets in those patterns is you're not as able to think outside those ruts. And so not only is that path a good analogy, but your mental pathways are kind of the same. If you typically go down the same one, you get the same answer. So what mind mapping does is make sure you get a map of all the pathways before you start to zero in and make some decisions.
Yeah, you didn't tell me that particular analogy, but you said, oh, stay open as long as possible. Wait,
Yeah,
do you
stay
remember?
loose till rigor counts.
Thank you. Stay loose
Stay
till
loose
rigor
till rigor
counts.
counts is one of the training strategies that I was taught. And it really is true. We are very tempted. I would work with groups of executives and, somebody would put out one idea, somebody else would put out another idea. Somebody said, we've already tried that. And then the biggest dog in the room would say, blah, and everyone would go, okay. And that really was not a strategy to get to innovation, breakthrough thinking, something new, something truly next generation, or jumping the curve to be more successful. So
I love
trying
that.
to find ways to
it really points out like that we're trying to rush the process a lot of times. We're trying to like hurry up and get somewhere, hurry up and be successful, or hurry up and whatever. So you really help to tease out the process and the journey, even in creating the mind map.
Exactly. And so when you're picking a color for a new branch, so you start in the center. With Felicity, we drew our picture of what the center was when we finished, when we had completed the map. And that oftentimes is how it works with my clients. We sort of figure out, and then when we see the whole map, we go, aha, this is the year of, or this is the name for that project, or this is where it's really all coming from. And if you think about branching off of that, you draw a branch and you put one word. You draw another branch and you put one word. And you put one word so that you can draw more branches off of that. If you put a whole sentence, there might be 3 kernels in there, and now you don't have 3 places to put branches. So do the people online want to try one?
Oh my gosh. I would have to pull them in though, right?
Well, just maybe to chat at the point where they get finished.
Yeah, I mean, Courtney wants to try it.
Okay, all right. So let's do that. Let's put a word in the middle of the page, and for us this time, let's put 2022.
Okay.
And then if you draw 8 like spider legs off of that, 8 straight lines coming out in a circle around 2022.
All right. So, Courtney, I didn't tell you have to have a pen and paper ready, but get a pen and paper.
Courtney, do you have a pen and paper? Are we good?
And Kelly also wants to try it, so get a pen and paper.
Great.
All right.
Pen and paper.
Repeat the instruction just so that they have time to get the paper and know what to do when they get it. So they're putting 2022.
We're going to put 2022 in the center and draw 8 lines coming off of that. And that's really all we have to do. I do this with groups a lot. And some of the most interesting, I've done it with groups that are, I've been working with a lot of nonprofits lately, and they might be wanting to name a new program, brand themselves, whatever. And so I tell them, draw a circle, put the program in the middle, you know, the current name or whatever it is to them, and then draw their 8 lines, and then put a word on each line. And interestingly, you know, you would think they're all in that organization, they're all doing what they do every day, they're all, you know, you assume on the same page, but we will come up with 35 different things that get written on the lines. You know, it's surprising because everybody has a slightly different notation, you know, shading for what they think of the organization. And it's then when we make that big list of 35 things, we can see where there's more concentration of thinking. So where we're already sort of in line, and then where we might want to be in line, and sort of what's new and different, and what haven't we thought of before. So that's how I use it.
What words should they put on the 8 lines?
Okay.
Things. Yeah.
So what everybody has their paper now, and they've written 2022 in the center. On each line, put one thing, and the top of mind, one word, not a sentence, not a phrase, not a description, one word on each line that you would like to be part of your 2022.
Very good.
And I'm going to time you.
Ooh, I love this.
About 30 seconds.
So this is really top of mind.
Well, I think, you know, the whole theory of education is that you remember a part of what you hear, more of what you hear and see, and much more of what you hear, see, and do. So
absolutely,
I thought it would be good for them to give it a little try.
Well, I love the 30 seconds. What?
Can people raise their hand in the chat or comment?
No, but they're just typing done and stuff like that, so that works.
Okay.
Although they might have the raise hand emoji. But yeah, so this should be about 30 seconds, right?
Okay, so if you have finished all your 8 lines and you're waiting, draw a line off each of those lines and write another word. If you've got more words sort of bubbling up, put more down. So by creating branches off the words you already have. So you have a line that comes straight off the word you already have, and then you do a branch there. So I'm going to another 5 seconds. Okay. How many people have something on all 8 lines? If you could count.
Oh, I cannot wait to see. Make sure you put it down. You know, I just want to say, like, Jane really pushed me to stay top of mind. I'm kind of, I don't know, I can be like a deep thinker. I want to say it a certain way. My creator and my editor start fighting, you know? And so she helped me just push. Just talk to me. Just get it out. All right. Courtney has 7. It's not bad.
Okay.
Especially with the delay.
And how many?
Yeah, that's real good.
Given a little more time. Do we have more?
Yeah. We'll see if Kelly chimes in here. She was the other one that said she wanted to try it. Kelly's got it. Thumbs up.
Okay, good. So when you get those things out, that's the top of mind stuff. And then the thing is to go to each of those branches. And if it's like, you know, friendships is one of your lines, then what would be some things coming off of there? Might it be, you know, girlfriends? Might it be church friends? You know, what kinds of friends? So that is one way to kind of keep expanding and expanding. Then if you go to church friends, then you can draw lines off of there and say, through this part of the, volunteerism I do, through this part of the kind of church attendance that I do, the ceremonial stuff, whatever, you can draw a branch for each of those, and then more people come off of that, and then more people come off of that. And that might seem like, well, that's just nice. You just made a list of your friends. But as you do that, you might start to see that you've got friends that overlap in those groups. You've got friends that you should introduce to other friends in those groups. You've got, some ways that you could maximize your participation in those groups by looking at your spider web of connections that you already have.
Yeah, I can attest that there just were some real ahas that happened as we did the mind mapping. I actually had shared with Courtney that when we had talked about my political run, I had not seen that as a way to bring some sort of advertisement or notoriety to the shows that I do. I mean, that like literally had not crossed my mind. And I'm not really sure what made you say that, but it was really huge actually, because there's ended up kind of being a flip in priority for me because the campaign is taking a lot of time. Um, when I was doing this with you, it was the day before I even found out for sure I was going to be doing it. So things have just really shifted a lot, but I felt very ready for it because of this aha moment. So so cool. So that's the kind of thing they can look to. So for each of their branches, they can keep kind of branching off, see what connections come. Um, and can you define for Courtney said it's pretty cool. She's having fun. She's got all of her 8 and she's working on it. She's definitely like this creative visual thinker.
Well, so one of the things is I help people with, anybody could sit and mind map, right? But when you and I mind map, I kind of kept you out of your regular path. And actually, you were not unlike many of my clients, where at first I said, so let's start. And you said, well, I kind of already know what I want to do. I'm not sure exactly what I want you to do. I want to outline what I want to do. And I was like, well, okay, can we back up and start over here? And, it was, and that's not any failure or fault. That's where we all come to this, right? We come with a set of expectations that we have set up in our mind. Mm-hmm. And so it's kind of like having a ruler that we always measure everything with the same ruler, right? But instead, we're saying, well, what if we throw the ruler out? What if we start to think in a different dimension? What if we, and when you were in school, you were taught to outline. An A has a B has a C, a 1 has a 2. And that is, a lot of us learned it that way. And that is absolutely the worst way to get a great idea for an essay, for a book, for a project. Because if you already are finding a 2 for your 1, you're forcing a structure onto something that isn't ready for a structure yet. Mm-hmm. So with mind mapping, you're kind of going all over the place. We just jump to a new branch when we sort of start into a new track. And I'm going to hold this up one more time. You might want to make it big again. But you can see that I've got branches for all different parts of my life. The financial part of my life, my family, my health, my book, the marketing of that, my second book, a lot of things that are sort of swirling around in my mind. And so what I find is that once I've done the math, it's all down on a piece of paper, and I don't have to think every day about, I should be thinking about that too. Should I do that? Should I? And it kind of keeps you on a path toward completing bigger goals. So I have little goals I've been working on for the last year, like eat healthy and make my bed every day, just because that gives me some structure in the morning, take my blood sugar. But I've got big things like finish my book, start the next book, sell so many copies by doing this strategy. So I'm able to sort of balance those. even
Talk
like,
to me.
doing
I've been
laundry.
wanting to ask you this, but can you define radiant thinking for me? It brings up such a beautiful word picture to me, and I feel like you've been giving us an example. But what exactly is that?
Well, if you look at the picture behind your head, you kind of have the sun, which is your idea, and then you have these rays coming off of it. And the rays are absolutely random. If you want to put health at the top and money at the bottom, or education, or whatever the things that come into your mind, they are the things that are floating around in your mind, maybe causing anxiety, maybe making you less than you could be in terms of productivity because you keep shifting from one to the other. I think, Felicity, when you recognize the sort of connection between political office and your program and your other things you're doing, it allows you to approach your political office in a way that may enhance your speaking. And it allowed you to approach your speaking in a way that might help people understand the value you would bring to political office. So having that context is really important in making sure that each thing you do out of the gate gets the biggest bang that it can.
Absolutely, and I'm so glad that I just think you have really shown how radiant your thinking is and how out of the box your thinking is. I mean, I'm a pretty out of the box girl, but you make some very unexpected connections for me. When we started my mind map, the question you asked me blew me back. Like it was just like the last thing I expected you to ask. And it's not like you're like this super wild person or anything, but
I'd
you
love to be.
really, yeah. Well, in a great way, right?
No, I like
But
that. Wild women get things done.
Kelly is really saying it's cool too. They are really enjoying this. So
Good.
I'm so glad you had. I mean, that just shows an example of your creative thinking. You just really have a way of seizing the moment and like seeing something there that maybe others wouldn't see there. So I definitely want to encourage you all about, if you're wanting to see this mind map you're creating go to the next level, as well as like I said, like you said, stay loose till rigor counts. You're pretty good at that rigor too. So you know how to take these little things and get them into a system. You're very practiced at getting these things systematized so that you're actually actualizing them. That by the end of the year, you can be like, okay, you know what? These things really did represent a lot of my year. These are things I'll carry forward into the next, but it's just not something that's going to be there without that's not actionable. You kind of took me through what you do with that to take it into a system. So very very highly recommend that. And I want to let you respond, but I think it's a great segue to the book. But is there anything else you wanted to share about that?
I was just going to say what I typically then will do with the client is ask them to sort of step back from the big picture and pick maybe three things that they feel are, the most maybe revealing, the most important, where they have the most energy. Oftentimes I think we go for the thing that we think we need, that we think people expect of us, or that we think we have to do in order to make the money to do. And if you kind of move in those need, must, other people's direction, it rarely is as exciting or fun. And oftentimes it doesn't work because when you follow sort of where your energy and the Synectics people who taught me the stay loose till rigor counts thing said the idea should make your socks roll up and down. So that's sort of the key thing. Like where on your map do you feel that kind of energy that your socks are rolling up and down? If you tackle that first with your energy and your attention, then you build on that success to do the other things. So on mine is getting and it is kind of every year I have to admit, but there's a whole branch of money, like making sure getting my QuickBooks right and following reporting and so I put my big goals into a calendar. I use the Passion Planner system as a planner, a paper planner. I use my like everybody, I use my phone to put in any kind of commitment I have or paste in a Zoom appointment or whatever. But I use my paper planner to lay things out. And so one of the things I realized maybe 7 years ago when I started using that system was that I did not have the kind of balance in my life I wanted. And I tended to go for the, it's good for you things all the time instead of the, it makes me happy, it brings me joy kind of things. So I started color coding the events in my calendar according to certain things. And I had sort of looked over it for a year or so before I came up with having one for my personal stuff, one for my business stuff, one for back room, like accounting, that green stuff for me, and I don't like that much. One for spirituality, one for activism when I do political stuff. So those were my 5 categories. And I was meeting with a client, and we were kind of had done our map, and she wanted to set up things for success. And so she looked at, she goes, I like your categories. I go, well, you should find your categories. Let's look at what all you want to get done, and let's figure out what categories you need to keep in a balance in your calendar to have that be true at the end of the year. And she said, well, I just really like yours. And then she looked again and she goes, well, where do you put when you work out? I was like, oh, so I didn't have a color for that. But at her suggestion, I added wellness to my calendar, and I color that orange. And when I, shop for the right foods, when I go to my doctor's appointments, when I go for a walk, that's an orange in my calendar. So I can show you just real quickly a quick look at my.
It's really pretty. Yeah.
Well, I know it's kind of, but so there's that. And you will see, I haven't actually entered in my last couple of days, that I'm tracking some things. I'm using my colors to indicate what I'm doing. And then I just do little bits of inspiration. And what I have found, the Passion Planner asks you to have a week focus. And for me, this week, it's keep going. Last week, it was get started. This week, it's keep going. And next week, it's already the end of January. So my point for next week is to finish strong. And as you sort of start to see your time, instead of just a dot on your iPhone calendar, I used to pull up my calendar and go, oh my God, something every day this week. Ugh, it's busy, busy, busy. And then when you actually click, you find out like one of them is some holiday you don't even celebrate,
Right.
You really have tons of free time in there, and you just can't see it unless you kind of put it out on paper. At least for me, that's one of the keys. So I have been doing the Passion Planner for about 7 years. But one of the things it has at the bottom, it has your work to-dos and your personal to-dos. And once you've set out your things that you feel are your important goals, in the front, it has you do kind of a little mind mapping exercise, and it asks you, where are your big goals? And then you break it down into 3 months, 1 year, 3 years, and lifetime. So I've been doing the planner for about 7 years, and my lifetime is finally last year, the year before, it's kind of solidified. It's the same things over and over now. Maybe I'll add one, to have the reputation I want, to have the relationships I want, to feel comfortable and at peace. There's several things that's my big goals. Those are the things that really matter to me. And then the things under that are the things that move me in that direction. So when you get down to what for the 3 months, if, one of my goals at the end of the year is to have my book sales be where they need to be and be ready to launch my second book, then I need to make sure in the 3 months I've done the things. So how many podcasts, how many appearances, how many posts on Facebook, how many different social media channels, what are all the things I'm going to do during this 3 months? I think the other thing that happens to us is we set some goals, and then all of a sudden in November, it's like, oh my gosh, I have 17
Right.
I have a mastermind group that meets with me once a month. And we were going around the table saying, what's the thing that if you really can accomplish it this year, you'll be most excited about? What's the thing that can have the biggest influence on your life and give you the most satisfaction? Defining satisfaction in that full range, that you have security, that you have peace, that you have hope, all of those things. And everybody was going around and saying one or two, sneaking in an extra one. But my friend who I spend a lot of time with said, "Oh, well, I have a lot. I'm going to lose 50 pounds. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this." She went through all these things. And and we all kind of looked at her and going, "And isn't that maybe the problem? Didn't you tell us those last
Right.
year?" So it's a little bit of, divide and conquer. Like, which of those, and I don't think you have to just do one. I wouldn't have all those colors in my calendar if I didn't think that it was not important to do multiple things at once. But some of my things, like making my bed every morning or meditating before I get out of bed every morning, are pretty easy. And yet I realized at the end of the year, so the Passion Planner at the end of every month, it asks you to do a summary, based on, how did you do and what could you do differently, how would you grade yourself. And at the end of the year, there's a real summary. And I went to my app that I use for meditating, and I had meditated for something like 55 hours that I would have
Awesome.
told I did a few minutes a day.
Right.
And sometimes I just, because the meditation app, I usually can pick one, and I'm like, I'm taking a 4-minute one because I don't want to do this today. But it all added up, and I know that it has had an impact on my overall outlook on life, on my
Very,
thinking
very
about more
exciting.
questions.
I'm
So
just
it's
like, I
tiny.
think this was so nice to have at the beginning of the year. Like, I'm so excited that this all worked out to have you here in January, because I think it's just making people feel like, wow, like I'm getting these things down. And it reminds me of the scripture in Habakkuk 2 2, that we write the vision and make it plain, that those who read it may run. But I've always thought of that just as like writing it down like in a paragraph form, but something with some visuals on it and more of these one word bullet points and branches, the way our mind actually works and is like mapped out itself, really works with us and causes, when I look at it, it makes me want to move. It motivates me to do something. So, I mean, this has just been such a precious gift. And I want to say, like, having heard your presentation on your book, Run with Scissors, which I love that title. It shows you really are a wild child. I shouldn't have apologized for that. You're a wild girl. But there are like ways to get ourselves thinking more creatively, in a systematic way. And that, I think that the book is a real good one way of encapsulating that, and what I got from your presentation. Can you share with us a little bit more about it?
Sure, I have to show you the book.
Absolutely.
So this was absolutely a project that was sort of in the back of my mind. I found some notes in one of my journals from 1989. I know
Mm,
maybe you weren't alive then, but
I was.
it's been something sort of in my mind, and it took different paths. I mean, at one point, I thought it was going to be about journal writing and about the value of journal writing and what that brings you. And then I published these journal cards and made this little journal card set. And I thought, well, it's going to be the companion to that set. And then I kept writing. And then I thought, no, it's just going to be, I had tentatively named it for a long time, Lessons from the Heart. And I thought, it's just going to be the stuff I wish I could share with people. And then eventually I started realizing, as I got a writing buddy, and we seriously met once a week to write for 2 hours. And then some days I would be on a roll and write for the rest of the day. And I started to realize that really what I wanted to tell people was that you need to ignore a lot of the traditional advice that you get. And that's where the title Run with Scissors came from. So Run with Scissors, we all were told, don't run with scissors, you'll poke your eye out. How many people's parents said that to them?
Yeah.
And yet, how many people have you met in your life with their eye poked out? I don't think it happens all the time. We'd have a lot more eye patches if that were the case. So I started thinking, all these things, these bits of advice we get, what if we took the opposite approach? And that's one of the things in creativity theory, is to flip the coin and see what the other side looks like and see what lessons are in the other side. So it became Run with Scissors. It's a guide for taking risks to discover your purpose. And purpose is an interesting thing. Lots of books about purpose, lots of people talking about purpose and five deeps in your whys. And I mean, the thing is, you can read self-help books until, for eternity. And there still would always be one more that you need to read. And so I sort of fought that. I thought, I don't want to be a self-help book. I don't want to tell people, here's 3 ways to be successful. Because I always feel like, maybe you eliminated 2 in your thinking that I needed, because I'm this big, radiant, open-minded thinking person. So what I decided was that if I took this idea that you would ignore conventional advice, that might be the way I would organize my stories. Because I felt like I had a bunch of little stories and I didn't quite know how to make them into a book. And so eventually I came up with the titles of the chapters, and I'll just look because it's quicker for me to read them to you. But it's, where there's a will, there's a way, there's no time like the present, coloring outside the lines, running with scissors, don't get too big for your britches, don't talk to strangers, don't be a know-it-all. All of the things that you were told you need to do or not do in order to be successful. So I took those as my headings and then wrote about stories in my life or in the lives of some of my clients I work with that proved that doing the opposite usually, or not usually, but quite often creates an opportunity or a success. So the book is little stories, lots of stories, kind of coached in these bigger concepts of why not try the opposite? Maybe there's a lot of Eastern philosophy, there's a lot of psychology around the fact that we get our expectations of ourselves from outside external forces, right? And where we really need to look is inside. And in the book process, I was looking inside at things that, were clues to who I was going to become, or maybe little ahas that I hadn't realized at the time. So I was a Catholic school student. And so at age 6 and 7, we marched across the parking lot from the school to the church and went to Mass every morning. And I would sit in Mass because you had to be quiet. It was a great practice in meditation and mindfulness, right?
Right.
You were quiet that hour of Mass or 45 minutes or whatever. I loved, my parents used to go, hey, we were out of there in 45 minutes. I'd be like,
how funny.
Is that the point? But anyway,
nothing of what we got in there, but how quick we got out. That's funny.
But that's a mandatory, kind of negative system gets you thinking that way, right? Got to go to church, so go to church and get it over with, So, but at this stage, I was sitting there and looking up at the cross, and here's, this Christ hanging on the cross with a big wound on his side and scary to a little kid. And I just was thinking, gosh, how did we find out about him? Where did this story come from? And, even leaving church that day, I looked up and there were clouds, and I'm thinking, who named the clouds? Somebody had to come up with that name, and then, well, what about? And so I always was sort of interested in this otherness around me and what it had to teach me, what my own understanding of it would be, that journey, that search, And so a lot of the stories in the book are about that. And they all tie back to me, to language. It's why I ended up being an English major, actually a rhetoric and composition. So I studied the history of language. I studied, all kinds of and a lot of the history of language comes out of myth. And so I talk in the book about Joseph Campbell and the hero's myth and the impact that myth. So, you think about religion maybe a little differently when you realize that almost every major religion has some sort of a rebirth story. Christ comes out of the tomb, or the chicken lays the egg, or the, Easter bunny comes and spring comes back. I mean, if you were a person way back in the beginnings of myth and language, and all of a sudden the flowers popped up again, and you'd say, whoa, this is amazing. We've been saved. And then eventually a few months later, they all died, and then it got cold, and then, the next year the flowers came up, you could go, whoa, this is amazing. Or you could start to say, oh, there's a pattern here,
Right.
So
Right.
patterns underlie a lot of what our belief systems are. And it's how
Mm-hmm.
we choose to interpret those patterns. So language and patterns and visuals have always been sort of my way of making sense of the world. So the
Wow.
stories in Run with Scissors are stories about aha moments, So I don't know who's read Winesburg, Ohio by Sherwood Anderson, but in that there's a collection of stories, and each of these people has like a moment of truth, you might call it. Sherwood Anderson calls it illuminations, like an enlightenment.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the people's stories, and I was a freshman in college reading this book for a class, and the woman realizes, I don't know if it's a woman or a man to tell you the truth, but she realizes that I am destined to live and die alone in Winesburg, Ohio.
Huh.
Pretty sad. But it was at the time when I was thinking, what is my college education going to get me? Where am I going to end up? Please, Lord, I hope it's not back in Lowell, Indiana again. It was a very small town, lovely place, but very small, not a lot of opportunity. And so, I can remember thinking, I am destined to live and die alone in Lowell, Indiana, unless I take a different path,
Mm.
So those are the kinds of aha moments that shaped different things and challenges and things I tried in my life. They weren't always successful, but I have to say at this point, I don't regret any of them. And in fact, one of the things I put on I have a journal writing Facebook page, Writing to Yourself. And the question I asked yesterday is, what is the thing in your life that went badly that you're really grateful for today?
Yeah. Such an important
So
question. What is the name of that Facebook group again?
that's Writing to Yourself. It's writingtoyourself.com is the website, and then Writing to Yourself is the Facebook page.
Okay. Great. That's cool. So you just give journal prompts every day?
Not every day. I'm not quite that disciplined, but at least once or twice a week. And it's
That's
funny
fun.
because I will oftentimes ask a question and nobody talks. And I've got, the same few people and there's, I don't know, 600 followers maybe. Nobody, and I'll say, what do you think? And they'll go, crickets, and sometimes only 27 people see it. Sometimes 60 people see it, but people don't want to talk, but I'm hoping they at least write. And I would say
Yeah.
my own journal writing has tapered off since I spend so much time on my computer. And I always said, oh, I'll never keep my journal on a computer, But on the other hand, because there is something to me, and I talk about this in the intro card to so the Writing to Yourself is a box of cards with 40 some writing prompts that you pull a card. Because when you went to buy a journal in a bookstore or pretty stationery store, if you bought the ones that had prompts, the prompts were at the top of the page, right? So I'd open and go, I don't want to write about that today. I don't want to write about that today. I don't, and you, like 2/3 of the way through, you find one, I guess I could write about that today. But the cards, there's 48. So you can just draw out of there. You can do that one if you like it. You can put it back. They're two-sided, do a different one.
Got it.
And actually, I do little workshops with that. I've been doing more of them now with a recovery house. And they some of them will look at a lot of cards, and then I'll say, just pick one and try it. So for example, one of the things that happened to me, I was going out to put the trash out, and it was just the end of winter. Snow was just melting, and I saw the parts of my crocuses, the little shoots of the crocuses were coming up through the soil, but they were bent over. They weren't popped out yet. They were just bent over, and they were bright chartreuse green. And I went into the house, and after I put the garbage out, and I said, wow, I'm going to write my journal. The color of those was unbelievable. Those poor little crocuses. I think it's a little too soon. Maybe this is not good. And then the more I wrote about that, I started thinking about, what is it that you need to pull away from the warmth and the protection of the soil? And pretty soon I was writing about me, about, when will I go on my own? What is it that I'm going to need? How am I going to get rid of my fear of poking my head out and trust that the sun will keep shining and I'll be able to bloom, So those are the kinds of assignments I give, kind of writing around an experience or an idea to get you to a little bit to trick yourself into a self-discovery.
Wow. Wow. I could listen to you all day, literally. Like you
I don't
just
know where
have,
we are with time.
well, we're good. I just, it's when I think of asking you a question, you say something else like kind of interesting and unexpected. I don't know. I'm having so much fun listening to you. It's really,
Well, thank
you definitely have a beautiful mind, a beautiful mind. I'll call it like that. And now I have, this might be a writing journal prompt, but if you can think of an answer, I'd love to know. Since you're not going to be the woman who lived and died alone in Lowell, Indiana. What do you think you would put on your tombstone, or what have you attempted to replace it with?
That's a really good question. I feel like I've gotten more and more clarity around that the last few years, because even writing the book, when I started thinking about writing the book, I thought, oh, I'm so smart. I have all this to share. I'm going to write a book. And then I'll be able to say, I'm an author. I wrote a book. And you can come to my book signing and I'll sign your book. That'd be a nice ego manifestation, right? But over time, and when the book finally finished, I realized that although, that's fun and I always wanted to do it, so I'm enjoying it. The real fun is having people send me a note and say, wow, that changed the way I thought about things, or that, you confirmed the way I was feeling. Or so at this point, my goal is to help people, to give them ideas, thoughts, inspiration, things that can help them in their journey. And one of the places I see that strongly, I think we may have talked a little bit about this because of your political intentions, but is for women. I mean, I was in corporate America kind of a lot of years ago, and I was in a huge global human resources firm doing consulting. And we had a lot of actuaries and insurance people and people who felt like what they did really was important. And we were communicators, and we were one person said, I think they do slides or overheads or something. you know we were just sort of unimportant afterthoughts. And
Mm.
at the first national, when I was first made a senior partner and went to the national meeting, there were 200 people and 8 of us were women. And that made me realize that, we still had a long way to go in terms of women. And then I had to dress like a man, wear a suit with a little silk tie and heels, and then
Oh,
those
wow.
stupid men would make me carry all the samples and wrote, boards and pieces through the airport while they charged ahead in their flat shoes. I was, so I had a
Wow.
lot of that in my experience. And I have 7 nieces and nephews, but 5 of them are nieces. And I started to realize that I helped them with their resumes and their keywords and their, job search and their LinkedIn profiles and stuff over the years. And that they maybe hadn't really experienced that in the same way I had. And so they may take it a little bit for granted. And the last few
Right.
years have really shown us that women's rights are at risk, I think. And that those hard won, and I would not have considered myself a feminist or a strong, but part of the book sort of goes to that side of, did you know that when I graduate from college, I could not have gotten a loan for a car unless a man signed? I
Mm.
could not have gotten a credit card unless a man signed. So you had to have a father or a husband, and that's where you got your identity and your freedom. And all of those things have changed so radically. And yet, we aren't necessarily out of the woods on women's health care, for example.
Mm-hmm.
So lots of things to think about. And so some of that came out in my stories too. And so if the book can help remind people of what matters to them and how not to take it for granted, remind people of where they, see the battle and which battles they want to take part in, and sort of step into their being. That would be, to me, the ultimate. So that's sort of the book represents my biggest hopes for where I'll live and die in the end.
So exciting. We have a real similar heart. And I think to, you know, have some internal awakenings, that show us our own personal power, that, it's not about like what someone else necessarily even did on a cross, but it's about what we're willing to die to and how are we willing to be reborn. And then what impact does that make on the world? So, and plugging into that, like seeing how that matter, and it can be different. It can be different for different people, right? Not everybody will have a color for what they do politically, but I tell you what, you need, I believe, and just having celebrated King Day recently, we need to at least think about it, right? Even if it feels twice removed, or whatever, but at least see a through line of what you're doing and how it impacts the society, because the common person not being involved has really made a lot of difference, leaving it to somebody else, somebody else, somebody else. You know what? Like, you get to be a certain age and you are them. You cannot be complaining about what they are doing. You are now them. Like, you got to plug in. We're responsible now. And so we need to think about how we're making our voices heard, and there's a lot of range of how we can do it. But I can tell you what, just in these few days of campaigning, just like kind of a common person, or at least, so many of my neighbors, they're not registered to vote. They don't know anything about what's going on locally, and just me getting involved gives them a level of knowing, gives them a level of interest, and as I talk about my views. So the more the common man does something, right, you end up having an impact on those around you. So I love that.
I think you get a spark of inspiration somewhere. And I just stumbled across a speech that Pete Buttigieg had made at IU on foreign policy way before he said he was going to run for president. And I knew he was the mayor of South Bend, which isn't far from me, and South Bend had gone through this big transformation, and I was going to a mastermind group over there, and people in South Bend were really psyched, and I thought, who is this guy? And after that one speech, I was like, how do I get involved? So that was my intent. But then by then I was like, well, I'm following wherever this energy and this path and this rethinking and reboot of America is headed. And I still, so it was in that true political thing. But then I also belong to the United Way Women's Group and, other groups that are making a difference in the lives of people every day, and I work with nonprofits. A couple I've been with homeless, help for homeless people. And I realize that it's not just all about giving things, but it's about giving things to get them through the current period, to get the skills they need, to get the ability to kind of be out and be a productive member of society. Absolutely. And enthused and have purpose and goals and happiness like the rest of us, and that if
very
you can't
important.
help. So I worked with a charter school that got people through their degrees when they hadn't. And, the data is so clear that doing the right thing is good for all of us. But so many people have a jaded point of view about, well, that's their fault. Let's leave them where they are. And I never saw that divide get so strong as it did in the last 4 years. So I was writing postcards to voters for all different kinds of primaries and elections, and I wrote hundreds and hundreds of postcards last year. Mm-hmm. And did that make a difference? I have no idea. But, a postcard with a personal note from somebody handwritten, if it at least made you think about it, then I feel like I did something, So
yeah, it made a difference to you, and it made an impression on you, and you make an impression on others. And it's really, really important that we be in this dialogue. And also, when you have a personal awakening, it changes the way you see others, and you see them as able. And so you're not just thinking about giving someone a fish. You know that they could own the whole fishing business. And that's really key. That we hold that there's accountability for that whole process, that we're not enabling. So much here that takes us down a whole other road, but I'm just thankful we kind of got there, because that's where my journey is leading. But it's also what I really strongly want to encourage everyone else is, like, this show's kind of about, more spiritual and personal development, but then what is that for? What is that about, right? And it's to be able to work together, have conversations, and then begin to empower others and just kind of move with it. And not just about building our own personal brands, personal empires. All of that impacts the community. So that's what we want to think about, I think, at this time. So anyway, thank you, Jane, so much. Around the World with Jane Lump here around the mind map. But wow, this has been
say one last thing about the book. So
yeah, and also where they can get it.
Okay, it's available on Amazon.com, and it's Run with Scissors, Jane Lump, a guide for taking risks to discover your purpose. But the thing I wanted to say is that I work with a lot of one-on-one clients now. I'm sort of not doing group process, and I'm doing one-on-one coaching, and oftentimes starts with vision boards or mind maps and goes into chunking out your goals and calendaring them and coaching and overcoming obstacles along the way. But if you can't be one of the people who works with me, one of the things the book does is every chapter ends with an activity. So it might be, so one thing I tried with a group the other day, I don't remember if you were on that day, Felicity, but one thing is don't get too big for your britches. So at the end, I have you draw a pair of britches and then put pockets on there for all the things you do want to keep in your britches, because we were subtly taught not to try to be too big, not to try it too hard, not to push too far. And the book helps you go chapter by chapter through some of the things that might hold you back, and then try little exercises at the end, sometimes writing, sometimes pictures, whatever. But I always find that I need to trick my mind into an aha moment. So there's a lot of little exercises designed to give you aha moments in the book. So
you definitely tricked our minds today. You tricked our minds today. I didn't think that we were going to go in this direction. I've had such a blast joining you, leading our viewers into this. I think people are going to have so much fun as they watch and even listen to it on the podcast. Jane, bless you. This has been just absolutely fantastic, and I really look forward to engaging you again.
Thank you. Have a great day.
With Run with Scissors, and I hope you meet all your goals with that this year. We bless you guys and look forward to seeing you all next week.